Hello there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of I Never Knew But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, your hostess, or life coach Maureen, as most of you know me. So happy to have everyone here today. Today is a Monday, and I know a lot of us struggle with Mondays. And first of all, I love the next guest that I have coming on because we just had a really nice off-air conversation. And I have a difficult time getting motivated on Mondays. So being able to meet him and start off by having these conversations, it really gets my blood flowing. So I'd love to hear from all of you of how you get motivated on a Monday. Let's get some conversation going. So let me tell you about my fabulous next guest. So my next guest is a native of Memphis, Tennessee, and he has lived in Texas since 1994. So I'm now his fellow Texan. He's definitely trumps me because I got 2 months under my belt. He and his wife, Carole, raised 3 daughters, including identical twins with severe intellectual disabilities and autism. With undergrad and graduate degrees from the University of Memphis, Clay managed 2 full-time careers for almost 20 years, one in the consumer packaged goods industry to pay the bills, and another as a volunteer advocate for people with disabilities. Love, love, love service. Over the years, Clay developed a deep understanding of the disability industrial complex and served on a host of health and education advisory committees, including board president for both the ARC of Dallas and the ARC of Texas. In 2011, President Barack Obama appointed Clay to the President's Committee for People with Intellectual Disabilities in Washington, D.C., and in 2013, he was appointed founding chairman for Texas Health and Human Services IDD System Redesign Advisory Committee, which he held for 6 years. Published multiple times in various media, Clay is often contacted by legislatures, the media, nonprofit organizations, and parents of children with disabilities to help understand the challenges that families like his live every day. Oh my goodness, I literally have goosebumps. How amazing are you? Hi, Clay. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Maureen. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
What a fantastic resume, first of all. Barack Obama is probably my most favorite president. And I love Michelle. I follow Michelle on Instagram and LinkedIn. I love her. I love everything that you've done. So here on I Never Knew, we start off with your knee story. And I can only imagine having identical twins is a joy and just amazing. And then when you find out, we have some difficulties, how hard that must have been for you. So I want to know your knee story, the one that brought you to your knees and you said, oh my gosh, God, what do I do here? I don't know what to do with my life, where I'm at. Where do I go from here? What am I learning here? So start us off with wherever you want to start.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. So my knee story, I guess, has 2 components to it. So when the twins, Paige and Mia are their names. So when Paige and Mia were 2 years old, Carole, my late wife, and I took them to their 24-month well baby visit at the pediatrician. And when you go for those well baby visits, they have the developmental milestone checklist that you go through. Mm-hmm. So Carole's holding Paige, I'm holding Mia, and we're going through the checklist for whichever child we're holding. We got to the bottom and looked at each other and realized, well, our stomachs kind of churned because we realized we hadn't checked anything off the list. So the 24 months, they should be saying certain words or say their name or respond to different things and crawling and so on. They weren't doing any of those things. So our pediatrician came in and looked at it and said, well, this is unusual. There's something going on here. So we got referred to Easter seals, which surprised me because at that time I thought Easter seals was kids in wheelchairs, physical disabilities. No, they do much more than that. So we went there, they did an assessment, and what came back was a diagnosis that proved out to be their long-term diagnosis. And again, this is 2002, so forgive the vernacular. Vernacular has improved since then. But at the time, the phraseology was mental retardation and autism. We now refer to it as intellectual disabilities and autism.
Yep.
And that's what it was used at the time. So that was kind of a shock moment. We knew they were developing slowly, but everyone had said, they're twins and they were premature and, they'll catch up and so on. But now we realized, okay, this path is going to go a little differently than what we had originally planned. So got into the raising kids mode, and it was tough. So when you say someone has an intellectual disability or they have autism, I've been in the gig for 20 years. I tell folks those words don't mean anything to me. I always ask, how does it manifest itself? That's what's meaningful. So in the case of Paige and Mia, so they are now 23 years old. They turned 23 last week. They're 23. They have never spoken. They need help with what's known as all activities of daily living, ADLs. So they need help with everything bathroom related. They need help with getting dressed and undressed. They can feed themselves, and they are mobile. Okay. We used to laugh. The great thing is Paige and Mia are mobile. The challenge is Paige and Mia are mobile. So we used to have it's called elopement in the gig. So they could take off pretty darn fast, but that's gotten under control as they've gotten older. But we had some challenges. You can imagine. And then we have our older daughter, Blair, who's 3 years older, and she was a traditional kid. So I affectionately referred to my family as the Boatright circus because there were a lot of challenges with Paige and Mia. They wouldn't sleep for years, and you'd have meltdowns at any moment, or they'd even when they were in a good mood, they'd grab you by the hand and take you to a certain place in the room, and you had to stand there. It was like that. It was their thing, and if you moved, you had a meltdown, and they would bring you back to that point in the room, and you had to stand there for what seemed like forever. That was one of the more positive things, but it was excruciating. Wow. Then you talk about the knee moment. This is quite literally a knee moment. So Paige and Mia were around 4 years old, and we were having a rough night at home. So they were having meltdowns. Blair was upset. Carole, she was upset. It's a Friday night. Everybody's falling apart. So I did what any good father, leader, family leader would do. I went to bed. I'm like, you know what? I can't fix this. Everybody's safe. So I'm just going to remove myself from the situation and recoup tomorrow morning. So I went to bed that Friday night, and I'm laying in bed. And I'm mad at God. I'll be honest with you. I really was. And I'm laying there in bed saying basically a prayer. And I'm saying, God, why did you do this to Paige and Mia? And to be blunt, why did you do this to me? Okay. And that was the question that was on my mind when I fell asleep. Was, why did you do this? Now, I don't usually go to bed angry. A few times I do. I'll wake up the next morning almost madder than I was the night before. It's like the emotions marinate overnight.
Right.
But that next Saturday morning, though, was totally different. I woke up Saturday morning just full of energy and excitement. It was like waking up on a mountaintop on a bright spring day with wind blowing into my lungs, and I was ready to take on the world. I was ready to go get it, feeling perfect, feeling great. And the very first words that entered into my mind were to help people like Paige and Mia, which I immediately interpreted as to help people with severe disabilities like they had. Okay. So at that point, I was working. My career was in the consumer packaged goods grocery business. I was a sales and marketing guy. Like most guys, focused on my career, trying to raise a family. Serving others was not on my radar, to be blunt. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when those words hit me, the very first words I thought that morning, there was no doubt in my mind that I did not create that on my own. I knew for a fact. I fell asleep asking God a question, and He sent the Holy Spirit and answered it. I fell asleep asking God, why did you do this? He sent the Holy Spirit and said, to help people with severe disabilities like visual.
Wow. Went to bed with a question, woke up with an answer. That's incredible.
Exactly. And really two great things happened at that moment. Number one was it happened. Number two was I had the wherewithal to realize it. So I thought, okay, this is a big deal. We'll say God spoke to me, but something has happened here. So what do I do? So I did what millions of people do every day when they have questions. I went to the family computer and I Googled it. I typed 4 words. I typed, again, forgive the vernacular, the verbiage at the time. I typed mental retardation, Dallas, help, enter. And up came the website for an organization I had never heard of called the Arc of Dallas. I looked at their website and I said, well, they seem to help people like Paige and Mia, and reached out to them on Monday morning. And then, to make a very long story short, I got on their board of directors 2 weeks later, soon became their board president, got on the statewide organization, the Arc of Texas, as you mentioned earlier, got to know a lot of legislators, got to know people in the system, got to meet hundreds, thousands of people, like families like my own. I understand the system. And as I'm learning these things, I was also in a position to help others learn the process. You mentioned the presidential appointment. All those things suddenly became my world. And to get a presidential appointment 9 years after I'm asking God a question on a Friday night, that was, again, not on the agenda, right? And I've been very blessed to have helped so many people along the lines, and actually feel like I've been able to fulfill what that direction was. So I know quite literally thousands of people, and unlike particularly most men, 95% of the people I know have absolutely no idea what I do for a living, but everybody knows what I do for free.
Wow.
And it comes out of me asking God a question, me being pissed off asking God a question on a Friday night is what it boils down to. So anyway, that was a very long answer to your simple question on describe the knee moment.
It's fantastic. All of it is fantastic. I love that, because the thing is, I mean, you go big or go home, man. I mean, you were just like, I'm going to be on the board of directors. I'm going to be going legislative. You went from not knowing really anything to like really knowing everything and figuring everything out. Did it change your perspective also of Paige and Mia too, instead of being so frustrated as any of us would be with our child? I was frustrated parenting my, as you called Blair, your traditional child. But did that help you kind of appreciate them more too? Did it also, like, because I would think that I would look at my children differently, because I feel a part of a community that understands that now, and we help each other.
Oh, absolutely. Realizing that there was a community there to be involved in was gigantic. One of the challenges that so many families who have disabilities, or parents who have children with disabilities, naturally go through is you feel very isolated, because particularly if you don't know anybody else in your friend network or your family who have had these challenges, you feel like, okay, I'm the lone wolf out here, and you don't know what to do, you don't know where to turn. It can be very isolating feeling.
Absolutely.
So finding that sense of community was huge.
Yeah.
Also, in terms of you asked how I viewed Paige and Mia, and this is where Carole and I kind of came to acceptance of their disability a little different. I was pretty cool. I never asked why, or well, ask God why, but I never was caught up on understanding, did something external, was there something that caused their disability? I spent zero time worrying about that. I was more worried about, what do we have to do now? What do we have to do for the future? Okay.
Yeah.
Carole, a year after we got married, Carole had Hodgkin's disease and went through chemotherapy for that, and it was successful. But from that point on, she always kind of wondered why God was picking on her.
Yeah.
She had that feeling. And then when Paige and Mia were born, it amplified even that much more. So she had kind of a bigger challenge on the acceptance side, understandably, than I did. And relative to my perspective on Paige and Mia, as I started to know more people and understand them and the uniqueness, this was kind of a faith, a growing in faith thing happened at the same time, in that if I truly believe, and I do, that God created everybody, okay, and God doesn't make mistakes,
Right.
and I know for a fact that Paige and Mia's disability happened at the point of conception, okay. Now, other people have their children may be different. There may be other things that happen later, and I get that, but I can only speak to my family. So Paige and Mia's disability, I know for a fact, was caused at the point of conception, which means God designed them that way, and God doesn't make mistakes. So with that, I had a whole new appreciation of Paige and Mia. I no longer viewed them as being broken.
Yeah.
They weren't broken and needed to be fixed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Instead, they are truly unique in the way God designed them, which obviously changes my perspective on them and also changes my perspective on everybody else, including those who have a disability and who don't. And I think that's from a pure selfish standpoint. Selfish seems like a strange word to use there, but from a personal development standpoint, that's probably really the best thing that happened to me, was the realization that, okay, Bible says God created everybody. Got it. He doesn't make mistakes. Got it. That means that if there are a lot of people out there who God created intentionally who are different than me, they look different than me, they have different backgrounds than I have, they have different experiences. Not surprisingly, they're going to have different thoughts and different points of view than I have.
Yeah.
You know what? That's okay. We may disagree, and that's fine. But God created them knowing their future just like he created me knowing mine. So it's really that greater appreciation for others is really the best learning I got personally. From Paige and Mia.
And that's so beautiful. And I love, it's really the key thing there is just the acceptance of it, where does it really matter how it happened? Does it really matter when it happened? But I'm going to say this, I'm going to throw in a little controversy there, because I know as a mom, we want the whys. And I'm more like your wife, where I'd be like, well, I want to know why. And I have a medical background. So I'm like, biologically, what happened when, what was off? And I'm going to say this, she may not have expressed it, but I can say probably your wife was like, did I do something? So there's a guilt factor. Mommy guilt is super strong. No matter what is in or out of our control, we feel like we had something to do with it. And I think men don't have that as much. You're a lot like my husband, where you guys are more practical and you're like, well, it is what it is. And here we are, let's just deal with what we got. And I think women have this overthinking quality that comes with mommy guilt and wanting to know the whys. But I love your perspective, where you're like, I went from feeling like a victim and asking God, why did you do this, to more of a thank you, I get it now. And I've been able to get all of these wonderful people in this community and help to put service out there. And I've always said to everyone, doing service for others is healing for us. And the community part, this podcast is all about that, because there's so many people, listeners out there, who feel isolated and alone. And whether it's addictions, or whether it's sexual violence, whether it's, a bad childhood, any of those things, once we sort of connect with people who've also been there, we feel like, oh, this relief. Like, I can share, I can vent, I can express things that I couldn't to someone who hasn't been there. And I just think it's So beautiful. And I think you're so amazing that you were able to say, okay, I'm just going to get up, pick myself up, do this for my daughters and for everybody else who's in the same boat as I am. And I love what you've done. Now, I want to get into what are some of the changes and legislature that you think or that you advocated for or that you think still need to happen for people with disabilities or families who take care of people with disabilities.
Wow, that's a really long list of things that we need to do to make things easier.
Yeah, what's your top 3, do you think?
The top 3. Okay, well, the top one's real easy. So the way our support system is set up in the United States is to use the Medicaid system
Mm-hmm.
as the facilitator to get funding and support to families or to people with disabilities like Paige and Mia have. Okay,
Yeah.
and I don't think most people know that. And I wrote a book recently, God's Plan, Our Circus, and in there I talk about some of the legislative conversations that I had, and I had a conversation with one Texas legislator who said, "Well, Medicaid, isn't that for illegals?" And I'm like, "Oh dear Lord, yeah, help me out. This is like the largest line item on his budget, and he has no idea what he's talking about." It's really most Medicaid actually goes to the elderly and to people with disabilities. Okay.
Yep.
And back in the day, back in the 60s, it was defined that they would use Medicaid as the mechanism for that. So the challenge that we have is, and a lot of people believe that, well, if you have a disability or you're poor, whatever the case may be, that there's all this money out there to help. Well, there's not. And it's set up by the state legislators to determine how many slots. And a slot is basically a person. So when you qualify, you get on a waiting list, you get to the top of the waiting list, and then you get a slot. Okay. Well, in some states, there really is no waiting list. In states like Texas, there's 100,000 people on the waiting list, and that waiting list can be 12 or 15 years long. So it's all, I say this half jokingly. I tell people, when your child is born, even though you think everything's fine, get them on the waiting list, because 15 years from now you may need something that you don't really know about. So,
wow.
So trying to get those waiting lists eliminated and get the funding in place to help the people who are desperately in need of it, that would be number one.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things are set up by the states, it makes relocating very difficult for families with disabilities, because if you're getting services in one state, they don't necessarily transfer automatically to another state.
No, and exactly. And I'm familiar because I was in the medical field for so long in Arizona. One thing I've learned is that those systems do not speak state to state. So in Arizona, we had the access system, which was the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. That was our Medicaid system. And I think Arizona did pretty well, because when it came to the disability, you got on pretty quick. So that's interesting about Texas. And then that was like we had different sections in Arizona in our Medicaid system where you had your developmentally disabled, and then you have, the low income Title 19. So it was kind of cool the way they where they broke it up into different funding for different sections. So I think that's kind of a key of all states. As I always say, we have 50 different countries in this country.
No, that's very true. And interestingly enough, Arizona is considered, if not the top, it's in the top 3 states in the country for people with disabilities, with developmental disabilities, because of the structure system that's been put in place. Now, you may disagree with this comment that someone told me, an administrator, a senior bureaucrat down in Austin, told me something one time when I cited that, because I said, it's also tempting to get into like the political side of it, and in Arizona, is as conservative as Texas is, right? So I mean, it's not a liberal versus conservative thing.
No, we turned blue this year. You don't know? You didn't know?
Really? Oh,
yeah, we turned blue. This was the first year we went blue. I think it's just anti-Trump kind of deal, but we finally went blue. But yeah, we've always been conservative Republican. This is the first time my entire life that it was blue. So interestingly enough,
I did not know that. Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I quit when that whole pandemic thing hit and the world fell off the planet, or just went nuts. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I kind of quit paying that much attention to it. But my point being, I was talking to one of the senior administrators down in Austin and said, hey, Arizona's got it buttoned up pretty well. How come we can't duplicate that? And his response, and you tell me you know the Arizona system better than I do. He said, yeah, but keep in mind, Arizona basically is two cities in terms of population.
Phoenix and Tucson.
Yeah, it's Phoenix and Tucson, and it's a lot just in terms of the dynamics, in terms of the access to healthcare, the access to systems, the finance. He said it's just really different there as opposed to Texas, where it's spread it's huge, but then also just you can have Dallas and Austin, which have really easy access, but then we have X millions of people in Texas who are an hour away from a doctor.
Right.
That's not considered unusual. That's not in Texas. That's not considered unusual. So.
No, you're very right. You're very right, because it is such a large state, land wise and distance wise. But I would say it's a similar thing, the Dallas and Austin versus the Houston. You're going to have those different demographics. So in Tucson, you're going to have a lot of need for those populations that are right by the border. So that is very true. And because I worked, this is interesting. How weird is this? And I don't care if we're getting into the medical system and politics, but I used to cover the Tucson area. So I lived in Phoenix, but I covered the Tucson area. I had all of southeastern Arizona where I would cover and go work with them on insurance and billing for a laboratory. I worked for a national laboratory. The system was completely different. And what they had in Tucson that I thought would be great to move to other places, which I have to tell you about the healthcare system since we've been here in Austin, I freaking love it. And I'm going to shout out Baylor Scott and White. They are so efficient and they do it so well. Where I worked for Banner Health in Arizona, which is gigantic. And but in Tucson, what was interesting was they had these groups, these healthcare groups, and they would help. They automatically get you qualified for access for Medicaid when you needed it, and they also had what was called fee for service. Now, I don't know if you have that in Texas, but and I wish this was countrywide, statewide. It's based on what you make. And I think healthcare should be based on what you make. It should be reasonable that if you make a certain amount, just like your tax rate, right? That's how we do our taxes. This is your income. This is the rate of taxes you pay. Why can't we base that? And I know years ago when I was in the medical field, they had that for children, for parents that could insure their children where they had a job, but they didn't make enough or they weren't offered insurance so you could pay a fee for service. So say you made $1,000 a month, then you would pay a $50 premium a month. Reasonable, but we don't offer that kind of thing now. So there's an idea for the Medicaid system. But I do believe that they were correct where you have different demographics within a state. So that's something that the legislature needs to look at, is what kind of demographics do we have in our state? Everybody can't be grouped into one general population.
It's interesting. I totally agree with what you just said, and it's that also leads me to another thought. And one of the great learnings that I developed as I was in disability advocacy was that one of the greatest disservices that we do to people with disabilities, and to be blunt, it's a disservice we do to everyone, we do to all each other, is the view that we're all one homogenous group. We're not.
Yeah.
And it's easy when we think about PWDs, people with disabilities, the acronym. It's easy to say, well, when you have a disability, here's the three things that you fit into. Wouldn't it? Not everyone's going to fit into those three things. Every situation is unique.
Yeah. Yes.
And again, that was one of the learnings that I got is recognizing that everything's unique. Everybody is unique. And to try and force fit everyone into a fairly simplified system, I use the word simplified as an exaggeration. it doesn't work sometimes, and that's one of the biggest challenges that we have.
Yeah, and it's unfair. And I agree with you a million percent. I think it's the same thing with mental health in general. It's like, you know, especially like if you have an EAP at work, which is employee assistance plan, they only approve their therapists and their counselors. And I've had people that have come to me for life coaching who've been going to therapy for 20 years and had no results, and they come for life coaching, and in 6 months we have a whole new outlook on life and positive change. You're right, it's the same thing. We shouldn't be put into a mold like your PPW. I love that you say that, or PWD. I agree with you. So that brings me to what kind of resources, because I wouldn't know the first thing. If for instance, like my daughter and your daughter is pregnant with our grandchildren and they needed help with a child with disabilities, you would know. What's the first place you go for resources, and should there be a bigger variety? What are things that aren't offered now that should be offered?
So it is a challenge, and it depends kind of on the disability, on where to go. But also, one of the things that I think we are doing a much better job now is pediatricians are pretty good, like the 24-month well baby visit, the milestone checklist. So there are mechanisms in place to help identify things early.
Yeah.
Since when you think about a child developing, and I'm thinking this is more intellectual and developmental disabilities as opposed to physical disabilities. Physical disabilities, it's a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's easier, but you know what you're trying to deal with. You know what the issues are,
and more recognizable.
It's recognizable, yeah. And so it's kind of a different approach, but with a kind of internal developmental disability, it can be a little bit more challenging. All the states have what's called PPCD or a similar acronym. It's a preschool program, like a preschool program for children early in the developmental stage, where they'll qualify as early as age 4 for some of these programs. And the pediatricians will recognize that and will kind of make a recommendation to the local school systems. And however the schools are set up, they may have, in the case of the Plano area where my kids were raised, Plano, Texas, you have certain schools that the kids will go to, or they may build it into the kindergarten component of existing schools. There's different ways to do it. But virtually all states have a mechanism like that, so you can catch things early and start getting some therapies there. Or you get some initial diagnoses, which then lead to some therapies. Certainly, in the case of autism, there's ABA, applied behavior analysis, ABA clinics are popping up all over the place. Now that insurance covers those types of things, that's more readily available. And there are organizations like the ARC that I mentioned earlier that are there. If you have a child with Down syndrome, the Down Syndrome Associations, the Down Syndrome Society have been strong for 50, 60 years and are great at providing support mechanisms. So there's different ways to look. I jokingly mentioned Google earlier, and this is where Google comes in really handy, and it can help you find a lot of things that are out there. You've got folks like me. I have started working with families. I've been doing it for a long time, but work with families to understand their unique situation. And I very rarely, unless I think someone's going to get hit by a proverbial train, I very rarely tell anybody what to do. What I do is I learn their situation and provide options and ideas. And if there's a parallel situation for my own family, I'll describe what we did and what the rationale was. But I'm not necessarily selling that idea.
Right.
Here's what we did. It worked. In some cases, here's what we did, and it was a flaming disaster. But we'll provide that insight. But then it's more about just offering options and helping people. I think that's the biggest thing, is helping people realize options that they don't necessarily see on their own.
Yeah.
Because particularly when you're bogged down in the challenges of the day, and it's hard to see past that. You just trying to get everybody up, get everybody dressed, try to keep the chaos under control. Do we have as many people alive and going to sleep tonight as woke up this morning. Oh, good. That's a successful day.
Yeah.
You look at it that way. And it's hard to start thinking of options down the road. One of the another blessing that happened along the way for us was when Paige and Mia started kindergarten. Literally the day we took them to the school, and they were in the same kindergarten school that Blair was.
Yeah.
We take them to school, and they knew coming in that Paige and Mia had their disabilities, so they were prepared. And as Carole and I are walking back to the car, I got hit with two aha moments. One was, wow, there are people in this world who are skilled, qualified, talented, much more so than Carole and I are, to educate people with disabilities, and they're found in the public school system.
Okay? Yeah.
And that's for a guy whose children were rejected by everybody. That was a really big deal. And another interesting fact: there are only 2 enterprises in the United States that are legally required to take everybody who comes in the door: emergency rooms and the public schools.
Wow.
And emergency rooms can move their patients out once they're stable.
Yep.
Public schools can't. They have to keep them for the long run. That makes it unique and special. So that was number one, was the importance of public schools for folks like Paige and Mia. The number 2 was, wow, this train is going to stop someday. And it's eventually, I soon learned when they transitioned out at 22. So in Texas, you can stay in school if you have a disability until you're age 22. Well, I did some quick math in my head and realized, well, they're going to be out of school many more years than they will be in school. So as their father, I owed it to them in terms of planning to understand the adult system before they needed it. And that was kind of unique because, and I didn't fully realize how unique that aha was at the time until I started getting into the system and going to meetings and so on. And I'd be sitting in a room with 15 people around the table, and everyone, they either had a disability or they had a child with a disability. And if they had a child with a disability, their child was 30.
Okay.
Meanwhile, here I am with 2 8-year-olds.
Right.
And I think a lot of it is, well, different components. One is, again, people are so mired in the day-to-day challenges, they don't realize the importance of getting out and getting engaged and so on.
Yeah.
And because of that, they'll wait until their child is 16 or 17, and then they're like, oh, well, they're going to age out of school here pretty soon. I guess I need to do something. Well, by that point, you're way behind the 8 ball. I mean, and so I feel kind of lucky that I was able to get ahead of it relative to Paige and Mia, but then it also enabled me to talk to my peer parents who had young kids and kind of help coach and say, hey, here's some stuff we need to be doing now to get ahead of it. So.
That's great. And I wouldn't even think about that. I mean, you really have to do some planning, but I would imagine the physical and emotional toll daily. It's like, you're just glad to get through the day. And it would be really difficult, I would think, to think of tomorrow, next week, let alone 10 years in the future.
It can be tough for a lot of people. There's a saying in the disability world is, what happens when the bus stops coming?
Gosh, listen, man.
And a lot of times people don't think about that until a few weeks before the bus stops coming. And it's like, no, you really need to plan that out, farther in advance, particularly if you're want to take advantage of services and understand what's available and things of that nature. Again, it's all about options. And I had a boss one time told me something interesting. He said, you know what the definition of power is? I said, no. He said, power, it's not money, or you don't get power through money and so on. Power is about having options. Now, a lot of times having money enables you to have more options. But when you think about people who are powerless, people who feel that they don't have any, they have no way to where to go. They don't know where to turn. They're stuck. They're in a rut. Life is horrible. It's because they don't feel they have any options. They don't know what their options are.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you can show people they have options, even if they don't take advantage of the option, which is a choice, even if they choose not to, just choosing to stay where you are suddenly makes where you are not as bad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah,
It's like
exactly.
it's like yeah, I did not sign up for this circus. On any given day, I don't like this circus. But you know what? I'm choosing to stay in this circus, or I'm choosing to allow this environment to remain. And I know I could do other things. Well, there's a certain power associated with that. Just knowing that you've consciously decided something as opposed to feeling like you've been victimized in terms of having to stay in this call it prison situation, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody knows that that's the main thing I say on probably every podcast is when you have choices, that's when you have empowerment. And that's the whole thing in life is I'm either reacting to what's happening or I'm taking action to not let things happen that I don't love anymore. I love all of that. I'm actually getting certified in as a life coach for people who are neurodivergent and on the spectrum. And I think that's something we need to bring to legislature as far as payment, because insurance doesn't cover coaching. And I think there are so many unconventional ways that we help people that traditional therapy and counseling cannot do. They stay in these modalities. And so I think we need to throw that out there to our Texas legislation, because I have neurodivergent, autistic, and ADHD clients who've made huge strides in very short amounts of time because, as you said, they have options. I give them options. I allow them to make choices and goals for their lives. And this is when these are more high functioning, or even developmentally disabled with traumatic brain injuries and that kind of thing. But they don't lose their abilities to think, they just think differently. And that's
Sure.
what I think we've twisted, is just that the wiring is just a little bit different than our neurotypical people. So I love everything about this. And as we wrap up, I have two things. And the main thing is, tell us where to reach you. Tell us what, everything that we need. If there's listeners out there who have children or are, disabled themselves, or they want to advocate for the developmentally or disabled, any of that. And also I want to know where to find your book and websites, all that good stuff. So I'm shooting it to you to market yourself.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. So, easiest way is go to clayboatright.com. So, ClayBoatright.com. That's where you can learn about me. And you can also learn about my book, which again is God's Plan, Our Circus. God's Plan, Our Circus. It is available either through the website or maybe easier for you to get it off Amazon. It's on Amazon.com as well as BarnesandNoble.com. So it's easy enough to go in and just type God's Plan, Our Circus. It takes you through the craziness of the diagnosis that we discussed. We talk about relationships with schools, how to engage with school personnel in a very positive way. It's really not a book about disabilities. It's a book about relationships. And relationships with the medical community, and relationships with friends and with educators and so on. So we talk about the disability world, and then we talk about, after Paige and Mia, we got them set up in a group home that they're in now. And 6 months after that, Carole was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she had surgery. They thought they got it all, did not, went through 18 months of chemo, and she eventually passed away. So I take readers through that. And between disabilities and Carole's passing, those are two pretty heavy topics. There's a lot of humor in this book. There's a lot. And it is very uplifting and positive. The last chapter is I call it the true comic relief of the story, which is the joys of dating in your mid-50s. That's a talk about a sociology experiment I did not plan to become a part of. So we get into that, and the ending of the book. I'll give you. They said you shouldn't tell the ending before people have gotten the book, but I'm going to tell you the last paragraph because it's an underpinning of the entire story. So the last paragraph of the book is: every day I look for something to appreciate, and I tell people how important they are. It's made all the difference. So that's the key takeaway of the book is helping, no matter no matter what your challenge is, raising children with disabilities, dealing with a long-term illness of a spouse, losing your spouse. There are so many things to appreciate along the way, and recognizing that, and then letting the folks in your life know how important they are to you. It's amazing how you will make yourself feel so much better when you do that.
Yeah. And you've had so much heartbreak and so much struggle with these very traumatic things, and to just see you and talk to you and your humor and your love and your service, it's a beautiful thing. And that's the whole reason why I do the podcast, is to show people that these things don't have to break us. They can just, you look for the beauty in life every day, even through the hardships and the loss. And I think it's amazing. And yeah, we definitely need to do some dating coaching. You need my book. My dog is my relationship coach, because I walk you through when I was doing the dating. I even did a stand-up comedy routine, which was a bucket list thing, about dating when you're over 40. And one of the things I said was, it's like picking the least bruised apple out of the dumpster. So it's really difficult, but you know what, when I do the dating coaching, you just gotta keep that bar of what you're looking for, and just make sure you know what your soul connection looks like. And bless Carole, our little angel up there watching over all of us and blessing this today. I know she is, but how precious and strong you were through that with your wife. That's hard enough. And having your daughters, and also for your oldest daughter, Blair, she probably gets a little bit mixed out in the shuffle there. And it's nice that, for Blair with her sisters and with you and losing her mother. I mean, that had to be a struggle too. And that could be a podcast in and of itself. I could probably do with Blair, but, staying strong as a family through all of that, and coming out on the other side, still being the loving person, that you are, I love. And just like you ended the book on a light note, we're going to end the podcast on a light note with my little segment that I do every podcast, and it's called Take My Money. Now, Mr. Clay, I would like to know, what is the wackiest, weirdest thing you've either bought or you have seen for sale? And while you think, because I know I spring this on people and it's hard to come up with it, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what I found today. Today on Etsy, and I just love these, and I think I might just buy them. Today on Etsy, I found 2 fridge magnets. The first one is $8.99, and it is the Pickle's Cage. Yes, the Pickle's Cage fridge magnet. And it is a pickle, and it has Nicolas Cage's little face on it. And I just think it's adorable. The second one, I just love these. These were so cute. And I'm like a dad joke fan, so everything I like is corny. I'm like, pet detective movies, like silly comedy. That's my style. The second one is Danny DeCito fridge magnet.
I think I haven't seen that. I think I've actually heard of that before.
And it's a little Cheeto with Danny DeVito's face on it. So yeah, the Pickle's Cage and the Danny DeCito. I can't. That like made my day. And that one's $10. So the Danny DeCito's a little bit more, $1.01 more. But I think I want both of them. So what have you got for me?
Well, Marina, I'm seeing a theme. You like food with celebrity pictures on it. Apparently, is that's your weak spot, or your guilty pleasure, I guess.
It's random, I know.
So mine is the first thing that came to mind. You said maybe something that I've bought. Yeah. So about, I guess it was 6-7 months after Carole passed away, I had moved from our house that we lived in forever into a area in Plano, an entertainment district. So in hindsight, well, at the time I needed to get out of the house I raised my kids in, wanted to be around people. I was probably going through a little bit of a midlife crisis at the time. I'd started dating people, so there was that craziness going on. And I wanted to get a motorcycle. So I went shopping for a motorcycle, and I was at the dealership and found out I couldn't even test drive one without a license, a motorcycle license. I'm like, well, that sucks. But then I saw this thing on the carport. I'm like, what's that? And it looked like a car, but it only had three wheels. It had two in the front and one in the back. It looked like a speedster thing from England in the 1920s. They weren't very expensive. It's called a Vanderhall. So I bought this thing, and it has become like my little trademark. And I took this thing around all over. I call it the toy. I tell people it's a lot like me. It's a lot of fun, but has no practical value whatsoever. So it's again just this fun little thing that it's part toy, part midlife crisis, part whatever. But again, it makes me smile. So that's the thing about it.
I mean, if I can crack up at a Piccolo's Cage and Danny DeCito fridge man, you deserve to go around town in your toy. And I've seen those. I actually saw two of them yesterday. They're cool looking. They're almost like Batmobile kind of looking things, aren't they?
Kind of similar. I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank on what they're in the same class. It's called it's not a motorcycle. It's called an autocycle. But yeah, they're kind of fun.
Wow, you didn't have to get a motorcycle license to drive it?
No,
because it's got the.
There's something called a slingshot, which is another type of three-wheeled vehicle. They're in that same class. My nephew he summed it up well. Yeah, he said it looks like a slingshot but for adults. So it's a little classier looking than, and nothing against slingshots. They're fine vehicles, but anyway. So again, it's a fun toy.
That's a great story. And I love that. That is definitely fun and wacky. And you know what? I love it. It brings you joy. And that's what this life is about. You deserve this. You bring joy to everybody else. And I can't thank you enough for being my guest today, Clay. Thank you for, as I always say, the hour of your life that, really you'll never get back. It's a value that I value because time is more important than money. And so I'm thanking you from the listeners and for all of those who needed this really important information today. I learned a lot. I think it's fantastic. So don't forget, listeners, to go to get his book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or his website, clayboatright.com. I'll have all of his information on his episode for you. And don't forget, we are now doing video on YouTube. So all of my podcasts are now on YouTube, so you can see our faces. And you're going to find his book, God's Plan, Our Circus, on Amazon and all of those places. So we'll have that information. As for me, a little housekeeping stuff today, my books, My Dog is More Enlightened Than I Am, and My Dog is My Relationship Coach, which teaches you about dating and makes your long-term relationships and search for meaningful love. All of that information, tips, and fun stuff about my own story, anecdotes in there based on all the wacky things that your dogs do. Just look at your dog. They'll teach you how to live life. That's all I'm saying. Bottom line. Mine are on Amazon, Outskirts Press, and Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and Target as well. And let's see what else we got going on. Oh, boutique, my doggy boutique, my dog is everything.net. I have a ton of new products on there, guys. So new treats for your senior and toothless dogs so they can enjoy some healthy treats. Everything's organic and healthy. And then the products are safety and adorable. Just saying, we're doing a lot of stuff here in Austin. So all my Texas people, come to Austin, come to our markets and come say hello. If you want to contact me, you want to get a hold of Clay, you can reach me as well. So my coaching is all available at lifecoachmaureen.com. I am now doing speaking events. So if you're interested in booking me for speaking, you can also do that on my webpage. Oh, and I gotta breathe. And that's it, guys. I'm so happy that all of you were here. Keep the 5-star reviews coming. If you want to be a guest, reach out. Reach out is the theme here, obviously. Love you all. And I hope that all of these episodes bring you joy and that you share this with your friends, subscribe, and let's build this community. This community is about love and being there for one another. We are not meant to be here on this earth without intimate connections and relationships. So we're here for each other. So love you all. Take care of yourself. take care of each other. Most of all, please take care of those furry babies and please adopt. Do not shop. Love you all. Until next time, we out.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Inc. community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.